Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. The topic that we will do today is beginning and ending the speech. In this topic, we will explore the roles played by an introduction and a conclusion in speech making. First impressions are important. A poor beginning may so distract or alienate listeners that the speaker can never fully recover. Moreover, getting off on the right foot is vital to a speaker's self confidence. In most speech situations, the introduction has four objectives. First is to get the attention and interest of your audience, then to reveal the topic of your speech, followed by establish your credibility and goodwill, and finally to preview the body of the speech. We will look at each of these objectives in turn. Getting the initial attention of your audience is usually easy even before you utter a single word. Keeping the attention of your audience once you start talking is more difficult. Here are the methods used most often. First is to relate the topic to the audience. People pay attention to things that affect them directly. If you can relate the topic to your listeners, they are much more likely to be interested in it. Even when you use other interest arousing lures, you should always relate your topic to the audience. Second, state the importance of your topic. Presumably, you think your speech is important. So, tell your audience why they should think so too. Third, startle your listener with an arresting or intriguing statement. You may want to startle your audience in the very first sentence of your speech and make sure the startling introduction relates directly to the subject of your speech. Fourth, people are curious. One way to draw them into your speech is with a series of statements that progressively stimulate their curiosity about the subject of the speech. You may build suspense about the subject to pull your audience into the speech. Fifth, asking a rhetorical question is another way to get your listeners thinking about your speech. In other circumstances, you may want to pose a series of questions, each of which draws the audience deeper and deeper into the speech. Sixth, another way to arouse the interest of your audience is to start with an attention getting quotation. You might choose your quotation from Shakespeare's or Confucius, from the Bible or Quran, from a poem, song, or film. Seventh, we all enjoy stories, especially if they are provocative, dramatic, or suspenseful. When it comes to speech introductions, stories are sometimes about well known events or public figures, but they can also be based on the speaker's personal experience. And finally, use visual aids. Visual aids are most often found in the body of the speech, but they can also be used in the introduction. They are most effective when they provide images that enhance the impact of the speaker's words. However, keep in mind that they are effective only when they are chosen strategically, relate directly to the speech topic, and are in good taste. The second objective of the introduction is to reveal a topic. In the process of gaining attention, be sure to state clearly the topic of your speech. If you do not, your listeners will be confused. And once they are confused, your chances of getting them absorbed in the speech are almost nil. Besides getting attention and revealing the topic, there is a third objective you may need to accomplish in your introduction, which is establishing your credibility and goodwill. Credibility is mostly a matter of being qualified to speak on a given topic and of being perceived as qualified by your listeners. Establishing goodwill is a slightly different challenge. It is often crucial outside the classroom, where speakers have well established reputations and may be identified with causes that arouse hostility among listeners. Even good listeners need all the help they can get in sorting out a speaker's ideas. One way to help your listeners is to tell them in the introduction what they should listen for in the rest of the speech. You must be sure your audience is not left guessing about the main points they should listen for as the speech unfolds. The use of a preview statement at the very end of the introduction to provide a smooth lead into the body of the speech is very much needed. You can also use your introduction to give specialized information, such as definitions or background, that your listeners will need if they are to understand the rest of your speech. Let's look at the tips for preparing the introduction. Try to keep the introduction relatively brief. Under normal circumstances, it should not constitute more than 10 to 20% of your speech. Be on the lookout for possible introductory materials as you do your research. File them with your notes so that they will be handy when you are ready for them. Be creative in devising your introduction. Experiment with two or three different openings and choose the one that seems most likely to get the audience interested in your speech. Don't worry about the exact wording of your introduction until you have finished preparing the body of the speech. After you have determined your points, it will be much easier to make final decisions about how to begin the speech. And lastly, work out for your introduction in detail. Some teachers recommend that you write it out word for word. Others prefer that you outline it. Whichever method you use, practice the introduction over and over until you can deliver it smoothly from a minimum of notes and with strong eye contact. Your closing remarks are your last chance to drive home your ideas. Moreover, your final impression will probably linger in your listener's mind. Thus, you need to craft your conclusion with as much care as your introduction. No matter what kind of speech you are giving, the conclusion has two major functions: to let the audience know you are ending the speech and to reinforce the audience's understanding of or commitment to the central idea. Let us look at each. How do you let an audience know your speech is ending? One way is through what you say. In conclusion, my purpose has been, let me end by saying. So these are all brief cues that you are getting ready to stop. You can also let your audience know the end is in sight by your manner of delivering. By use of the voice, such as its tone, pacing, intonation, and rhythm, a speaker can build the momentum of a speech so there is no doubt when it is over. One method of doing this has been likened to a musical crescendo, as in a symphony, in which one instrument after another joins in until the entire orchestra is playing. The speech builds in force until it reaches a zenith of power and intensity. Another method is using the dissolve ending, a conclusion that generates emotional appeal by feeding step by step to a dramatic final statement. The final words fade like the spotlight, bringing the speech to an emotional close. The second major function of a conclusion is to reinforce the audience's understanding or commitment to the central ideas. There are many ways to do this. Here are the ones you are most likely to use. First is restating the central ideas and main point one last time in your summary. Second, the closing quotation is particularly good because its urgency is exactly suited to the speech. When you run across a brief quotation that so perfectly captures your central idea, Keep it in mind as a possible conclusion. Third, rather than using a quotation to give your conclusion force and vitality, you may want to devise your own dramatic statement. Some speeches have become famous because of their powerful closing lines. Finally, an excellent way to give your speech psychological unity is to conclude by referring to ideas in the introduction. Summarizing the speech, ending with a quotation, making a dramatic statement, referring to the introduction, all these techniques can be used separately. But you have probably noticed that speakers often combine two or more in their conclusions. Actually, all four techniques can be fused into one. For example, a dramatic quotation that summarizes the central idea while referring to the introduction. Now let's move to the tips for preparing the conclusion. First, as with the introduction, keep an eye out for possible concluding materials as you research and develop the speech. Second, conclude with a bang, not a whimper. Be creative in devising a conclusion that hits the hearts and minds of your audience. Work on several possible endings and select the one that seems likely to have the greatest impact. Third, don't be long winded. The conclusion will normally make up no more than 5 to 10% of your speech. And finally, don't leave anything in your conclusion to chance. Work it out in detail and give yourself plenty of time to practice delivering it. Many students like to write out the conclusion word for word to guarantee it is just right. If you do this, make sure you can present it smoothly, confidently, and with feeling, which is without relying on your notes or sounding wooden. Make your last impression as forceful and as favorable as you can. First impressions are important, so are final impressions. This is why speeches need strong introductions and conclusions. That's all for this topic. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.